Greetings and salutations, fellow random items on my desk. His I, Eric J. Chucci, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast. Obviously, we're talking about the Legend of Vox Machina. But first, this podcast is going up on March 1st, which is a great time to subscribe to my Patreon. If you did, you'd get a shout out, and you'd be cool, like Rob, a guy from Ohio, and Jesse Wiak. We appreciate all of you. You would also get episodes of Journey of Wrestling early, as it says in the ticker.
Other stuff is in the ticker as well. Look at it, do what it says. And now let's talk about the legend.
We should be honest with the listener.
Okay.
Ultimo Dragon has done a lot for professional wrestling.
He deserves honesty.
He deserves honesty.
Once again, I'd like to state for the record, we don't remember why you're Ultimo Dragon, but you are.
Ultimo Dragon knows.
He's the only one who needs to. We don't need to know. He knows.
So, just a few days ago, as of this recording, Elden Ring came out.
So, we're not going to be waxing too poetical about this.
Also, because we finished watching this series like a week ago.
Yeah.
A smarter pair of idiots would have
gotten this podcast in before Elden Ring came out. And, right after we watched the show. That didn't happen.
So let's talk about our backgrounds with Critical Role first, because I feel like we need to fill time. I mean, the Ultimo Dragon should get an understanding of where we're coming from as fans of the property.
I think first I want to give a general review of the show.
Okay.
Spoiler free for if you're here and you don't know about what happens in this campaign somehow. It's really good.
I just really wanted to shout Scanlan dies. Scanlan does not die.
I don't think he does.
In season 1 of the show.
It's really good. It's a really well made animated show. It's mature without being like the almost cringy sort of bawdy sort of mature that a lot of adult-themed animations can be.
The first episode had a lot of it, and it had me a little worried. But after the first episode, honestly, during the first episode, they got to a point where they weren't that bad. And it gets a lot better about the bawdiness going forward. You're still going to have dick jokes.
Scanlan is still in the show.
Yeah. But they begin to feel more
in character, in universe. They make sense. They're not there just to prove, hey, we're grown-ups, which is a problem I have with a lot of, to be honest, older animation that was geared towards adults. More modern stuff like Castlevania and Arcane and this it's not really a problem that exists so much anymore.
Well, they're not pointed at being humorous, and that just because of the context of the original material is sort of intrinsic.
Part of it,
yeah.
Because Critical Role is a funny show, and people make jokes in it, and Scanlan is in the show. So
Scanlan is toned down from the source material.
Which, I mean, okay, pretty good.
Good call, yeah.
That's actually another thing I want to talk about, but I do want to get into the history, as you mentioned. I just wanted to say this is a really good show. Watch it if it sounds interesting, but
I have some issues with it, but it's really more about like my preferences toward pacing and character portrayal, and even divorced from the original content. It's not a bad. You know what? I'd say it is slightly higher than Dallas and Robo.
One of our most popular uploads, so there you go.
Yeah, it's not a bad show at all. Just, there have been better shows recently. Cough, Peacemaker, cough.
Look, that's not a fair bar to hold people to, okay?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's the bar. I'm saying it's the watermark.
Fair enough.
There's the Mandalorian and Peacemaker up there, and then everything the fuck else.
But you wanted to talk about our history with Critical Role.
I did. I wanted to mention at least, so people have some context. We both have our issues with fandom as a concept. I would not go so far as to call myself a critter.
I wouldn't either. At least partially because that term makes me cringe inside out.
Most labels make you cringe inside out.
Yeah, I don't like them.
Very punk rock of you.
I'm the least punk rock person alive.
I was laughing more because I labeled you. I heard that said so often, and only now did it hit me at how fucking backhanded compliment it is. Anyway, I watched most of, over half of the first campaign. Beyond the scope of where Season 1 of The Legend of Vox Machina ends. But not too far beyond.
Whereas I, hilariously, watched pretty much only the first season of The Legend of Vox Machina's worth of Campaign 1 of Critical Role. I tried to watch it years ago, from the beginning, and couldn't. I've had a long personal journey with watching other people play D&D as much as I love it. And I was trying to get over that. I was recommended to start at the beginning of the Whitestone arc. Because it's a great place to jump into the campaign, and it's when it sort of gets its legs underneath it.
Also, Orion Akaba's not there anymore.
I wasn't going to say that directly.
I'm saying it directly. I'm glad he's not there. I'm glad he's not in the show.
He does a good job as Just Cause guy.
Cringe man? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. He does a good job as cringe man, annoying and always touching Matt Mercer's lady. I'm
not invested in this many years old internet drama, so I'm going to move right along.
I'm not really invested in it. I'm just glad he's not there. He was the part of what made me getting into Critical Role difficult. Every time I would turn on an episode, he's being that guy. And if you guys have played D&D...
You know that guy.
You know that guy. And that was the I am uncomfortable by this dude being here thing that made Critical Role difficult for me to get into. Starting with the Whitestone arc is an incredible decision, both for storytelling, because there's not a lot of mucky stuff from beforehand that you need to pick through, and storytelling in the sense that it's a really good story.
Yeah. I kind of tapped out after that because of my own personal issues with watching other people play D&D. But to be honest, it had nothing to do with the fine folks at Critical Role. It's just I have problems watching other people play D&D.
Yeah, it can be difficult.
But I got through the Whitestone arc, so I am qualified to speak on this. This is an adaptation of this specific material that they covered in this specific show, which is a fun coincidence.
Neither of us are quite hardcore enough to, be like, that line was said a bit differently.
I couldn't fathom knowing that much about someone else's D&D campaign.
I mean, Elder Scrolls.
That's fair.
So all that being said, I'm also pretty much aware of a lot of the side stuff. I've got spoilers for most of the rest of their campaigns.
I don't really, actually, weirdly, but I have a functioning brain, so I can guess.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I'm not mad about it. It's just it's a lot of content to digest, and that is one of the things I like about the show. Is that these are unique stories and they're fun, interesting characters given to me in a format that is easier to parse.
That's actually one of the things I really wanted to compliment on the show. The show does a great job of tightening, tooling up, and a term I've used before on the podcast, going through a solid set of adaptation distillation on every member of Vox Machina. Every one of them is sort of purified into what the intent is behind the character, as opposed to the not always perfect improv of the people playing them. And hey, I play D&D. I am more than aware of not exactly delivering the character you want to deliver. So I'm glad the people behind these characters got the opportunity to take a second pass and really get things right. Get things how they wanted them.
Yeah. I have two complaints in that regard. One, Grog is a bit more absolutely stupid. Not that he wasn't in the campaign.
He is significantly less bloodthirsty.
Well, that's probably coming.
No, but I remember, this is literally the part of this campaign I watched.
Right.
Grog was bounced between goofy stupid guy and almost chaotic evil sounding incredibly bloodthirsty psychopath.
He's a barbarian from the bare sense of the word.
And, like, I'm not against it as a character, but that is definitely something that got cut out.
Yeah.
Or at least vastly diminished in the adaptation.
He spends a lot more time being sweetly stupid.
As opposed to being terrifyingly stupid.
Sure, yeah. There's no tennis match. It's just, he is a great fighter, but, that's not, there's no berserker rage. I also don't really care for the way they've done Vex.
I think that's very clearly what Laura Bailey wanted out of the character, that she was not fully able to improvise into in the moment.
Ironically, I more liked the Laura Bailey in the moment playing this character as opposed to a very clean, scripted version of her.
Because the Laura Bailey version is much less self-assured. She's much more tense and anxious.
Yeah, but like in a natural way for that character who has escaped what this character has escaped.
Whereas Vex in the show is clearly much more of the original intent of the character, which is someone who's very put together, very in charge, fits with her being the one in charge of the money for the group. It makes sense, and it makes sense as a contrast to Vax, who honestly is probably the one who comes through the cleanest. I don't think
really clean.
I don't think much of anything was changed about Vax.
No. Honestly, the only things they changed about Percy were just time on screen.
Time on screen and,
because so much of the ass end of this show, honestly, the last 3 segments, the chunks they released it in,
are about Percy.
Were about Percy, so, a lot of his smaller, more nuanced, more friendly parts were cut or moved.
Because this is his side quest.
Right.
They started season 1 with the Percy side quest of Critical Role.
I was sad as a fan of Taliesin, but it was still really good, so whatever.
And
we'll get it later.
In the last episode, they clearly show the more balanced, happy Percy that we're probably going to get more of in the future.
Yes. However, with the complaints, I would like to offer compliments. As you said, Vax is just clean.
It's like a 1-to-1 translation. They made some minor changes between him and Keyleth in the sense of how their romance subplot went. I'm not sure why they changed what they changed, but it's one of the few things I remember very clearly about Critical Role and the order of things happening, and they changed it, and I don't know why. I'm not against it, certainly. I'm going to be honest, I don't really have much investment either way.
It's probably just tighter storytelling overall. Like you said, adaptation, distillation. I will say I'm really happy that a lot of Scanlan's more scatological humor was cut.
Fewer poop jokes. His poop of scrying.
Fewer actual pooping.
Yeah, he pooped a lot.
He did a lot of pooping.
Sam Riegel finds poop very funny. And a well-made poop joke very funny, so fair to him.
But, when you're playing D&D, you're throwing a lot of poop jokes at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I'm glad that they didn't throw
as many poop jokes. Yep, that's...
And honestly, his humor in general and the way they portrayed his bardic songs, because they obviously can't use copyrighted music parodies like he did.
Yeah, which, by the way, I do want to throw a compliment Sam Riegel's way. That was consistently really fucking impressive. The way he could just magic up a Weird Al parody of a song specifically about what was happening at the exact moment, so he couldn't have pre-gamed it.
Yeah, he was very good at that.
That was very impressive.
There's a part of me that's wanted to play a Sam Riegel bard for a long time now, just to see if just to challenge myself.
That's got to be really hard. That's an impressive thing. They didn't do it so much here because you're right. They can't do it. It would very much weirdly be out of sync with the rest of the show to have him suddenly be doing Taylor Swift's Bad Blood. Yeah,
it's a little more anachronistic than they like to go.
It's fun in a D&D campaign. It wouldn't have fit in an animated show. I'm glad they went with something more original.
I would like to also say that Keyleth is way less annoying.
I'm almost certain that's what Marisha Ray was intending to play.
Yes.
That's the character she wanted to have on the screen, and she was, as I understand it, again, I don't know very much at all about Critical Role, very new.
Oh yeah, this was her first campaign, if I remember correctly.
And so it didn't always, the character she wanted to be didn't always come through, and some of the problems the character was actually supposed to have in character were compounded by her not knowing the rules very well.
Sure.
I want to say, this is something I found out after I actually ended up watching what I watched of the original campaign. I guess Marisha Ray got like a huge fucking internet hate storm for Keyleth.
I mean, they give her a huge fucking internet hate storm every now and then just to keep her on her toes, I guess.
It's baffling, because, like, alright, I'm gonna be honest with you, I watched Critical Role. Keyleth wasn't my favorite character. She was a little grating. But seeing what the intent was, now that I can see the Legend of Vox Machina, seeing the character this person was clearly trying for, it, like, retroactively makes the character in the Critical Role campaign less annoying.
Well,
because I get what the idea is now.
Sure, and it's about having patience for what somebody is trying to create. Like,
especially in an improv context like D&D, you gotta be patient with people.
Yeah, and the fans of Critical Role, I would like to say that most of them are smart, competent, composed adult individuals.
There's also a lot of young people, and young people take what they watch and absorb very seriously in an emotional way, and that's not really healthy. And it's not healthy. You usually grow out of it.
Yeah, well, sometimes.
Usually, I said usually.
But like, you know, when you are that passionate about something, especially because this is so many people's window into Dungeons and Dragons, like, it baffles me how much I see on various Reddit threads, because I love Dungeons and Dragons, people going, my party won't name themselves. They won't give themselves a title for their party. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's not a normal thing to do.
Or it wasn't anyway.
Like, Matt Mercer is an excellent, wonderful DM. He says the word entity too much, but he's an excellent, wonderful DM.
Why was I drinking?
But he and his crew have, like, infected, it seems like an overly negative term, but it's the only one I guess seeded.
It's literally called the Mercer effect.
Their particular peculiarities into the wider net of what people think D&D is supposed to be, and it's baffling to watch happen.
He hates it too. Like, he's like,
I'm sure he does.
We're professional voice actors. Quit being mean to DM. They're doing their best.
Also, just so we're clear, I can't imagine anything I do as a DM becoming that popular. I would turn inside out. It would be awful.
As I understand it, the Dark Tower series is very popular.
I don't always steal from that series by itself.
I'm sorry, Red Dead Redemption 2 is also very popular.
Right. I like cowboys. But like, it would be very embarrassing for me.
Sure.
But
that's the difference between the two of you. You wouldn't stream your D&D campaigns live
God,
on
no,
Twitch.
never. Just so we're clear, there's never going to be a Patreon goal for that. There's never going to be we're not doing that. That's not a thing I'm going to do.
I'll run the campaign. It's fine. If you guys want to give us like $1,000, I'll fucking do it.
That's fine. He can't. I'm not done.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the show.
There's literally one more character. I am so happy we got more Ashley Johnson. I am so happy we got more Pike, because she was absent from most of this arc, and I'm glad they didn't just Houdini her out of the show.
I am also glad because I didn't see much of Ashley Johnson, because this is pretty much the only arc I watched. This is a really fun character. Pike rules. Yeah. What little I saw of Pike in the, obviously in the part I watched, Pike rules, but it wasn't that much.
And we get to see some nuance, and we get to see some changes to how her journey away from the party was handled, and I think that's really good.
It's a great way of cleaning up what a real-life complication caused. So, the show itself, separate from the Critical Role campaign, does the Legend of Vox Machina hold up as a show, as a narrative?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I really enjoyed my time with this show. These characters are good, and perhaps that's why I was so inclined to lead with a assessment of the characters first. And the world is interesting, and the animation is great.
The animation's fucking killer.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Titmouse is good. I've loved all the animation they've done that I've seen. But like, some of the scripting is strange. Some of the pacing is really rushed. And I get why, because I understand how much you're cramming into 12, 45-minute episodes? Less? 30-minute episodes? I know how much you're trying to fit condense, because like each episode of Critical Role is like 3-4 hours. I mean, there's table talk and ad breaks and shit like that in there.
Table talk and ad breaks and like the mechanic and combat. What is a minute and a half combat scene is the majority of a session of D&D.
Sure, it takes 6 seconds for a turn to play out. And you can really see that translation here.
Another thing I really like, and this is something I like that does separate it from the campaign it is birthed from, they clearly do not have much of a... they don't feel much of a need to strictly adhere to how things work in D&D.
I appreciate that, because obviously they don't have the D&D license. That would have cost extra money.
And so they don't make references to like spell slots and everything is much more, magic feels much more kept back from the viewer in terms of its mechanics.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other changes for interpretation. Like, I mean, it's Scanlan's hand, not Bigby's hand, and it can do a lot more things.
It can do a lot more things, which frees up new and interesting scenes and new ways of adapting things that happened in the campaign. Little tiny stuff like Vax being able to do druid healing magic because he saw Keyleth do it and he knows the ingredients. Obviously, that's not going to work in D&D. But they being able to adapt the minute by minute exactly what happened in all the fights, who hit who all the time. They didn't feel the need to exactly adhere to what happened in the campaign mechanically, which freed them up to use combat more structured, to use it as a way of continuing to tell the story, as opposed to D&D combat, which is just sort of very chaotic and random and doesn't always make thematic sense.
A great example is the campaign I was running last week. You guys got to the bottom floor of a tower. It's a space D&D thing. You were fighting a group of bad guys, a gang, like a literal like mafia. And within a turn and a half, you capped the boss and then just had to deal with his minions. It was a tense combat, because I'm a pretty good DM, but like, narratively speaking...
That would be terrible.
It's god-awful. But shit like that happens in D&D.
And it's fun in D&D. It's good, at least interesting stories. But in a narrative, in a structured narrative of like a show, it's better to have the freedom to use combat to tell the story. And I like that they felt the freedom to do that. Because there exists a world where they didn't feel that freedom.
Yes.
I mean, the Critical Role fan base can be very, very vocal.
Well, and whether it's because of them or because of your one's desire, I should say, to translate a delicate thing you've made into, even more digestible pop culture media. Like, I don't remember when Scanlan got potions. And for some reason, he needed to have this weird thing about now he can turn into weird monsters from some shit he found. Like, that was a really unnecessary... When you're keeping magic as behind a curtain as you are, when you've established so little about what characters can and can't do and why, what an odd thing to animate. To bother taking up time in the show to be like, oh, Scanlan has a new power now.
As opposed to it just being a potion... Which I believe it was in the show. I
think he just had a polymorph spell, like
or something,
whatever.
I mean, it was a fun little payoff.
It was nice. Like, I liked the payoff. I'm glad they did that thing. I'm glad they did the polymorph thing. But like, the setup for it was incongruous, unnecessary.
For me, it was I felt it was just a good way to utilize a joke.
I suppose, yeah.
Like,
there's nothing wrong with that.
It was clearly used as a joke, and then the payoff for the joke is something cool happening.
Sure.
That's kind of Scanlan's whole deal in the campaign.
Yeah.
He's a wacky comic relief character until he's suddenly super badass.
Pretty much, yes. But it's small things like that like detract from the show for me. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said earlier, it's still a really good show. I definitely preferred it to the Book of Boba Fett.
I actually just really like it. Yeah. I think it was fun. I think it was well paced. I think they picked a good stopping point, a very interesting way of looking into season 2.
I agree.
I like that they got through the whole Whitestone arc. Of course I do. It's the one part of campaign 1 I've watched, so I got to do a lot of... I know that!
Things get very interesting from here, and I'm really glad they're getting another season.
Same. I just want to see more of this. because I have trouble watching other people play D&D.
Sure.
So getting to see this story in a cleaner, adapted, much more easily digestible way is very good for me. I've started to try and watch season 2. I'm about halfway through the first episode. I'm making my way downtown. It's a very good thing, a Critical Role. I have issues.
Well, and like it's not for everyone, and it's worth noting that this is probably the best portrayal of people playing D&D together online. Like, Critical Role didn't become the top on accident.
They're very good at their job.
There's a lot of production value into things, and they have so much time to be angsty or argumentative or develop characters or do fun side bits or poop that you get to indulge. It's like reading canon fanfic while watching the show, because you get that deep extra level of indulgence, or the supplemental comic books, or the novels for the expanded universe, or what have you. You get those deep dives, those self-indulgent deep dives into a character that you would not normally have. And that's nice, and it's great, and stuff like that is what really makes me like certain characters from the original material, as compared to their show portrayals, which again are just fine. Like, I have developed a habit of being nitpicky about the things I love, because I want to hold myself to a higher standard as both a viewer and someone who understands media. But we still watched this show Saturday after it premiered, all 3 episodes right in a row, laughed our asses off, got into the drama, enjoyed the animation, enjoyed the plot line, tried to find every Matt Mercer that was in there.
There were so many.
One other thing I do want to get into before we close off this podcast, so that you can go play Elden Ring.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do as soon as this podcast is over.
I like how, and it's so simple, it's not hard to do, but I'm glad they did it. It feels like Dungeons and Dragons. It feels like a tabletop role-playing game. Whether that's all of them crowding around a door and each in succession failing to open a fucking door, or making a big deal about deciding to open a fucking door, which is just D&D 101. Go back to our DMing podcast we made years ago, and our piece of advice for you, if you are ever stuck, put a door in front of your party.
That'll buy you time to think about what's behind it, because it'll take them time.
It's just so true. And even the way they handle all the dialogue, it seems kind of, I don't know, the quality of the animation. Look, this isn't a Brickleberry, okay? This isn't fucking Big Mouth. It looks clean and good and nice, so I don't expect these characters to be going, well, fuck, I don't know what to do. So there's like this juxtaposition, not quite to an absurdist degree, but it's like, oh, you're allowed to say adult words?
You're allowed to say grown-up words?
People aren't being constantly very fucking serious, which is another thing I loved about Castlevania, but to a much less extent there. Mostly just when Belmont and Alucard were fighting with each other. But they're allowed to be that way. They're allowed to make those shots across the bow, those mean jokes. They're allowed to have a dick-punching contest. Like, it feels D&D. It's the dumb shit you get into when you're bored across the table and no one is really sure what to do, and you feel a bit mischievous, and you're like, I've never used this spell before. What's my barbarian up to? I deeply appreciate that.
It's very fun to watch, and it gets the vibe across. And a D&D party is a very specific kind of group of people you don't see in other media, and that isn't derived from D&D.
Sure.
That a lot. That specific vibe of like a D&D party. And the conflicts and the side jokes and the in jokes and that sort of thing. The adventuring party.
Yes.
It's very common in a lot of media derived from D&D, but it's not super common elsewhere. And a lot of the media derived from D&D doesn't always get the vibe right. This does.
Yeah. I would say as well, a lot of media derived from D&D, and this is something the show avoids doing, probably because they recognize how important these personalities are to their product. They don't try to take it too serious. Because if you look even at the first Dungeons & Dragons movie, terrible though it is,
Jeremy Irons isn't. He's having a great time.
or even the sequels, which were, ironically a lot better for being like direct to video. They're focusing on the story and the characters and doing things in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. There's no sort of translation of the table talk, of the
vibe.
Of the vibe, yeah. So it's less like... This show, more than anything I've watched that is supposed to be like tabletop role-playing, gets across the vibe of the tabletop role-playing part instead of just telling you a fantasy story with an ampersand logo on it.
Yeah, that is a great way of putting it. To mention slightly better material, another thing recently that I felt did a great job of that exact vibe is Peacemaker.
Yes, yeah, I would agree entirely. It takes realness, humanity, and just because people, when faced with terrible things, will make jokes.
And sometimes they're going to try and make jokes, and those jokes aren't going to land.
No. Like poop on the wall.
Sometimes it doesn't stick. Everything's better when nerds talk about it. Fuck it!